He heard the song before he remembered the night. It drifted out of a cracked radio in the corner of the bus station, thin and trembling, as if the music itself had traveled too far and grown tired. The notes touched something deep in his chest, a place he had boarded up years ago. His fingers tightened around the strap of his worn bag, and for a moment the world tilted, as if time had lost its balance. The bus station smelled of dust, diesel, and old rain. People moved around him with the quiet urgency of those who were leaving something behind or chasing something they could not name. He had been doing the same for most of his life. Leaving towns before they learned his name, leaving jobs before they learned his habits, leaving people before they learned his heart. He told himself it was freedom. He told himself it was survival. The song on the radio stumbled into a familiar chorus, and his breath caught. He knew this song. Not just the melody, but the way the singer's voice broke on the third line, the pause before the final note, the ache hidden between the words. His mind resisted, but memory has a patience stronger than denial. It was the song she used to play on repeat in her small kitchen while making tea, humming along, sometimes off-key, sometimes laughing at herself. It was the song that had been playing the night everything changed. He sank onto a plastic chair, the cold seeping through his coat. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened window, older than he felt, younger than he looked. Lines carved by sun and regret framed his eyes. He had been many men in many places, but right now he was only the one who had run. Back then, the town had been quiet, the kind of quiet that made even footsteps sound like confessions. He had arrived with little more than his guitar and a plan that barely deserved the name. He would stay a month, earn some money fixing fences and tuning instruments, then move on. That was the rule. Always a month. Long enough to breathe, not long enough to belong. She was the first person to speak to him without suspicion. He remembered the way she stood in the doorway of the cafe, sunlight caught in her hair, holding out a cup of coffee like a peace offering. "You look like you need this," she had said. He had smiled, a practiced smile, the kind that promised nothing. "I probably do." Her name had been soft, carried on the air like something meant to be handled gently. They talked about nothing at first. Weather, music, the strange comfort of small towns. But even then, something in her eyes told him she saw more than he intended to show. Days turned into weeks. He fixed her broken porch step. She listened when he played guitar in the evenings, sitting on the floor with her back against the couch, eyes closed as if the music were a place she could rest. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself it always was. The night the song came back to him in the bus station had been warm, heavy with the promise of summer storms. They had argued, quietly at first, then with the sharpness of truths held too long. "You're leaving," she said, not as a question. He had stared at his hands, at the calluses that proved he had built something and destroyed something in equal measure. "I don't know how to stay." "That's not the same as not wanting to," she said. He wanted to tell her everything. About the night his father never came home. About the way love had felt like a trap ever since. About the fear that if he stayed, he would ruin this too. But fear is a convincing liar. It told him leaving was kinder. The song had been playing softly in the background as she spoke, the radio a witness neither of them noticed at first. When she finally turned it off, the silence was unbearable. "If you walk out that door," she said, her voice steady in a way that hurt more than anger, "don't come back unless you mean it." He had walked out. Years passed measured in highways and cheap rooms. He played music for strangers who clapped without listening. He loved people in pieces, never enough to need forgiveness. Sometimes, late at night, he dreamed of her kitchen, the way steam from the kettle blurred the windows, the way she used to lean her head against his shoulder when she thought he wasn't paying attention. He told himself she had moved on. He hoped she had. It was easier that way. The bus station announcement crackled, pulling him back to the present. His bus would arrive soon. Another town. Another beginning that wasn't really a beginning at all. He stood, but the song's final notes clung to him, heavy as a hand on his chest. Without fully deciding, he stepped outside and flagged down a taxi. The driver glanced at him in the mirror. "Where to?" the man asked. He hesitated. The name of the town tasted like memory. "East," he said finally. "As far as you can take me." The road stretched ahead, dark and endless. Rain began to fall, light at first, then steady, tapping against the window like fingers asking to be let in. He watched the lights blur, thinking of all the moments he had blurred himself to avoid pain. When the taxi stopped, the driver turned. "This is as far as I go." He paid, stepped out, and stood in the rain. The town sign loomed ahead, letters faded but familiar. His heart pounded, each beat a question he could no longer avoid. Her house was still there. The porch step he had fixed had been repainted. The light in the kitchen window was on. For a long moment, he stood across the street, rain soaking through his coat, rehearsing words that felt too small for the weight they carried. He crossed, slowly, as if the ground might disappear beneath him. His hand shook as he knocked. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Time did something strange then. She was older, like him, lines of experience softening her face, but her eyes were the same. Curious, guarded, alive. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence. "You came back," she said. He nodded, throat tight. "I didn't know how to stay before. I'm still learning. But I know why I ran, and I know it was wrong." She studied him, searching for the man who had left and the one who stood before her now. "Why now?" He swallowed. "Because I heard our song, and I realized I've been living half a life without you in it." Her eyes glistened, but her voice was firm. "You don't get to come back just because it hurts less now." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking for what we were. I'm asking for a chance to be honest. Even if it leads nowhere." The rain slowed, as if the world itself were listening. She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," she said quietly. "You're soaked." Inside, the kitchen smelled of tea and something warm baking. He took off his coat, every movement careful, as if sudden gestures might break the fragile bridge forming between them. They talked until the night thinned into morning. About everything he had never said. About the loneliness she had carried. About the ways they had both changed. Tears came, then laughter, then silence that felt less like absence and more like peace. When dawn light crept through the window, she reached for the radio and turned it on low. The song began again, softer now, no longer a wound but a reminder. He closed his eyes, breathing in the moment, knowing nothing was guaranteed. But for the first time, he was not planning his escape. He was staying with the uncertainty, with the fear, with the fragile hope growing between them. Sometimes, he would later think, the bravest journey is not the one that takes you away, but the one that brings you back, asking you to face what you once left behind and choose, finally, to remain. He believed leaving was an act of love. That was the sentence he repeated to himself the night he packed his bag, folding his clothes with hands that would not stop shaking. Outside, the city breathed in slow, restless sighs. Inside, the apartment held the warmth of a life he was about to abandon. Every object seemed to watch him, accusing, remembering. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, as if counting the seconds until he became a stranger. She slept in the other room, unaware, her breathing steady, trusting. He stood in the doorway for a long time, memorizing the way her hair spilled across the pillow, the faint crease between her brows that appeared when she dreamed too deeply. He told himself he was doing this for her. He told himself that staying would only poison what they had, that his fears and silences would one day break her. Leaving now, he thought, would hurt less than staying and failing later. He was wrong, but understanding often comes late, after damage has already been done. They had met during a season when both of them were quietly falling apart. He was carrying old wounds he never spoke about, scars from a childhood that taught him love was temporary and promises were dangerous. She was rebuilding herself after years of choosing everyone but herself. Their connection had been slow, careful, like two people learning to walk on cracked ground without causing more fractures. She listened in a way that made him feel seen even when he said nothing. He loved her for that and feared her for the same reason. When she looked at him, it felt as if she could see every place he was broken and still wanted to stay. That terrified him more than loneliness ever had. At first, he tried to be brave. He cooked dinners, laughed more than he used to, even spoke about the future in cautious sentences. But at night, when she slept beside him, fear crept in. What if he failed her? What if he turned into the man he swore he would never become? What if love demanded more than he could give? Instead of sharing these fears, he buried them. Silence became his shield. She noticed, of course. She always did. "You're drifting," she said one evening as they sat on the balcony, city lights blinking below them like distant stars. "I can feel you leaving even when you're right here." He smiled, soft and empty. I'm just tired. She accepted the answer, but something in her eyes dimmed. That was the moment he should have spoken. That was the moment courage could have changed everything. But fear is patient. It waits for the quiet moments, for the times when love feels too real to risk. And so, one night, he chose what felt like the safer pain. When she woke up, he was gone. No note, no explanation, just absence. For weeks, she searched for meaning in the silence. She replayed conversations, reread old messages, traced memories as if they were maps that might lead her back to him. She wondered what she had missed, what she had done wrong. The questions became heavy companions, following her through days that felt suddenly hollow. He, meanwhile, kept moving. New cities, new rooms, new faces that never stayed long enough to ask difficult questions. He told himself she would heal faster without him haunting her life. He told himself distance was mercy. Years passed. He learned how to survive without belonging. He worked, traveled, slept beside people whose names faded quickly. Sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, guilt would surface, sharp and unexpected. He imagined her moving on, falling in love with someone better, someone who stayed. That image hurt, but it also comforted him. It meant she was okay. Or at least, that was what he told himself. Then one evening, after a long shift and an even longer silence, he heard a song playing from a passing car. It was an old song, one they used to play while cooking, singing badly, laughing at themselves. The sound struck him like a memory he could not outrun. He stopped walking. The world blurred. For the first time in years, he did not push the feeling away. He let it come. He realized then that he had not left to protect her. He had left to protect himself. He had confused fear with love, escape with sacrifice. The truth settled painfully in his chest. Staying would have required courage. Leaving had been easy. That night, he barely slept. He thought about the man he had been and the man he had become. Neither version felt complete. Somewhere between them was the person he might still be capable of becoming, if he dared to face what he had done. The next morning, he booked a ticket back. The city looked smaller than he remembered, or perhaps he had grown heavier with time. As he walked familiar streets, memories rose uninvited. Every corner held a version of himself he had abandoned. Regret pressed against him, but so did resolve. He did not come to be forgiven. He came to be honest. Her building stood exactly where it always had. He hesitated at the entrance, heart pounding, mind screaming for retreat. But he had spent too many years retreating. He knocked. The door opened slowly. She stood there, older, stronger, her presence calm in a way that startled him. For a moment, recognition flickered, then hardened into something guarded. "You," she said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. "I'm sorry," he said, the words breaking before he could shape them properly. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I just needed to say it." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. He saw questions in her eyes, pain carefully controlled. "You disappeared," she said quietly. "Do you know what that does to someone?" "Yes," he replied. "I do now." She studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment felt different but familiar, like a life rebuilt with intention. They sat across from each other, two people connected by a past that refused to stay buried. He told her everything. About his fear. About his mistakes. About the lie he told himself to justify leaving. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not ask for another chance. He only spoke the truth he had avoided for years. She listened, just as she always had. When he finished, she exhaled slowly. "I loved you," she said. "And I hated myself for not being enough to make you stay." The words cut deeper than anger ever could. "You were never the problem," he said, voice breaking. "I was afraid of how much you mattered." Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not look away. "You don't get to rewrite the past," she said. "But you do get to face it." They talked until evening. About her life after he left. The therapy she needed. The strength she found. The love she learned to give herself when he was gone. Each word humbled him. When he stood to leave, she surprised him by walking him to the door. "I don't know what this means," she said. "And I'm not promising anything." "I'm not asking," he replied. "I just wanted to stop running." She nodded. "That's a start." Outside, the air felt lighter, though his chest still ached. He did not know if love would return or if it even should. But for the first time, he was choosing honesty over escape. Weeks passed. They spoke again, cautiously. Coffee turned into conversations. Conversations turned into understanding. Trust rebuilt slowly, unevenly, like a fragile bridge. One evening, as they walked together under a sky bruised with sunset, she reached for his hand. Not tightly. Just enough to say she was still there. In that moment, he understood something simple and profound. Love was never about leaving before things broke. Love was about staying long enough to try, even when fear whispered that you would fail. He squeezed her hand gently, knowing the future was uncertain, but finally willing to